The morning sky on Zelthara Prime turned dark as massive ships blocked out the sun. Elder Bloomtel watched from his garden as the reptilian vessels settled into position around his peaceful world. His flower-like body trembled as he counted. 12 warships, each one larger than the biggest building in their capital city. The Krovas had come just like the warnings said they would. For 3 seasons, refugees from other worlds had arrived with terrible stories. They spoke of green-scaled warriors who demanded complete surrender from peaceful planets. The Krovas Empire was growing, and now they wanted Zelthara Prime. Bloomtel's petals dimmed with worry as he walked to the communication center. His people had never built weapons or trained soldiers. They grew food, studied plants, and lived in harmony with their world. The most violent thing a Zeltharans had ever done was accidentally step on a flower, and even that made them sad for days. "Elder, the Krovas are sending a message," said Petalwind, his young assistant. Her bright colors had faded to dull browns since the ships arrived. "They want to speak with our leader." The hologram that appeared showed a tall reptilian creature with sharp teeth and cold yellow eyes. Admiral Sikthar wore metal armor covered in spikes and carried weapons that could probably destroy half their city. When he spoke, his voice sounded like grinding stone. "Peaceful plant creatures of this world, I am Admiral Skathar of the Krovas Empire. Your planet has been chosen to join our great civilization. You will surrender all your resources and technology to us. In return, we will allow you to continue existing under our rule." Bloomtel tried to keep his voice steady. "We are a peaceful people, Admiral. We have no weapons and no desire for conflict. Surely we can find a way to coexist without surrender." The Krovas leader laughed, showing rows of sharp teeth. "You have 7 days to decide. Submit to the Empire or we will take your world by force. We have done this 47 times before. No one has ever chosen to resist us." The transmission ended, leaving the Zeltharans in terrified silence. Bloomtel knew they had no choice but to ask for help. Their planet had joined the Galactic Council 5 years ago, specifically for situations like this. The Council had promised to help member worlds in times of crisis. "Send an emergency message to the Galactic Council," Bloomtel told his communications officer. "Tell them we need immediate assistance. Request diplomatic negotiators, medical personnel, and humanitarian aid workers. We are facing forced occupation by a hostile military force." 3,000 light-years away, the message traveled through space using the Council's emergency network. But something went wrong with the old translation systems. The automated routers, designed decades ago during a different era, misunderstood key words in the message. The system interpreted "immediate assistance against hostile military force" as a request for military intervention. Instead of sending the message to the Council's Humanitarian Aid Division, it routed the plea through outdated military channels that had been established during the last Great Galactic War. The distress signal bounced through several relay stations before reaching a monitoring post in the Terran Defense Network. Lieutenant Kevin Ross was drinking coffee and reading reports when the alien transmission appeared on his screen. He had never seen anything like it before. "Captain Morrison, you need to see this," Ross called to his commanding officer. "We just received what looks like a distress call from an unknown alien species." Captain Jake Morrison was a veteran of 3 major conflicts. He had fought in the Proxima War, survived the Asteroid Belt Campaign, and led ground forces during the Mars Rebellion. At 42 years old, he had seen enough combat to know when someone needed help. Morrison studied the translated message on his screen. The alien species called themselves Zeltharans, and they were under attack by something called the Krovas Empire. The message spoke of forced occupation, surrender demands, and a peaceful civilization facing extinction. "Sir, according to our databases, we have no record of either species," Ross reported. "But the message is definitely a request for military assistance against an aggressive occupying force." Morrison made his decision quickly. Earth's military doctrine was clear about protecting innocent civilizations from hostile invaders. He had spent his entire career defending people who could not defend themselves. These Zeltharans sounded like they were in the same situation. "Send word to Admiral Chen aboard the Retribution," Morrison ordered. "Tell him we have a Code 7 situation requiring immediate intervention. Unknown alien species requesting assistance against hostile occupation force. Within 2 hours, Admiral Rick Chen had assembled a full battle group. The fleet consisted of 3 heavy cruisers, 6 destroyers, and 2 assault carriers. The flagship, HFY Retribution, was a massive battlecruiser designed to fight entire enemy fleets. Her weapons could crack planets if necessary. Lieutenant Colonel Lisa Hayes received orders to prepare the 3rd Marine Expeditionary Unit for immediate deployment. Her Marines were the best trained soldiers in human space, veterans of countless battles against pirates, rebels, and hostile alien encounters. They specialized in planetary assault operations and close-quarters combat. Hayes briefed her troops in the main hangar bay. 2,000 Marines listened as she explained their mission. They were going to liberate an unknown alien world from an aggressive occupying force. Intelligence suggested the enemy had superior numbers and advanced technology. Marines, we are, dealing with an unknown threat that has overwhelmed a peaceful civilization. Hayes told her soldiers, our job is to break their blockade, establish orbital superiority, and conduct ground operations to eliminate all hostile forces. We go in hard and fast. The Marines checked their weapons and armor. Each soldier carried enough firepower to level a city block. Their combat suits could survive direct hits from tank cannons. They had trained for every possible combat scenario, from urban warfare to deep space boarding actions. Meanwhile, on Zelthara Prime, the Zeltharans waited for help to arrive. Bloomtel spent his days in the garden, trying to stay calm while the Crovis ships hung overhead like storm clouds. His people had never felt fear like this before. They were herbivores who had evolved on a world without predators. The concept of violence was foreign to their entire species. Elder, still no response from the Galactic Council, Petalwind reported. The Krovas are demanding an answer in 4 more days. Bloomtel nodded sadly. He had hoped that council negotiators would arrive with medical supplies and diplomatic solutions. His people needed food, medicine, and peaceful intervention. They wanted teachers who could help them understand this crisis, not soldiers who would make it worse. The human fleet entered hyperspace, traveling toward the Zelthara system at maximum speed. Admiral Chen expected to find a heavily defended enemy position. He had prepared for a major battle against technologically advanced opponents who had conquered an entire world. Neither side understood what was about to happen. The Zeltharans had asked for aid workers and received humanity's most efficient killers. The humans thought they were rescuing a devastated world and were about to encounter the most peaceful species in the galaxy. The stage was set for a confrontation that would change the balance of power in their corner of the universe forever. The human battle group dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the Zelthara system, like thunder splitting the sky. Admiral Rick Chen stood on the bridge of the HFY Retribution, watching his tactical display light up with contact markers. 12 enemy vessels surrounded the planet in a classic siege formation. Sir, we have multiple hostile contacts maintaining blockade positions around the target world, reported Commander Jane Miller, his tactical officer. Configuration suggests they are preventing escape rather than preparing for assault. Chen nodded grimly. The situation looked exactly like the intelligence reports had suggested. An aggressive alien force had trapped innocent civilians on their homeworld and was slowly strangling them into submission. He had seen this pattern before during the colonial wars. All ships, battle stations, Chen ordered. Prepare for immediate engagement. These people have been waiting long enough for rescue. On the Crovis flagship, Admiral Escathar received notification of new contacts entering his system. His scaled lips curled into what passed for a smile among his species. This happened sometimes when the Galactic Council sent negotiators to interfere with Imperial expansion. The weak-minded Council species always sent 1 or 2 ships to make diplomatic protests. Hail the newcomers. Escathar commanded his communications officer. Tell them this system is now under Imperial control. They have 1 chance to leave before we demonstrate our superiority. The Krovas had used the same intimidation tactics on 47 worlds. Most species submitted immediately when they realized the Empire meant business. The few that resisted usually gave up after losing a ship or 2. None had ever posed a real threat to Imperial forces. Admiral, The alien vessels are not responding to our transmission, the communications officer reported. They appear to be moving into attack formation. Scathar sighed with annoyance. These newcomers would have to learn the hard way that the Crovus Empire was not to be challenged. He had dealt with stubborn council species before. A few demonstration shots usually convinced them to leave. Fire a warning shot across the bow of their lead vessel, he ordered. Make sure they understand we are serious. The plasma bolt streaked across space and impacted the forward shields of the UES Retribution. The human battlecruiser barely noticed the hit, but Captain Jake Morrison interpreted it as the opening of hostilities. His training kicked in immediately. All hands battle stations. We are taking fire from hostile forces, Morrison announced over the ship's communication system. This is not a drill. Repeat, we are under attack. Admiral Chen watched the tactical display as his fleet moved into combat formation. The enemy had just fired the first shot against a peaceful rescue mission. In his experience, aggressive aliens who attacked humanitarian operations usually had something terrible to hide. Admiral, enemy weapons appear to be significantly weaker than expected, Commander Miller reported. Their plasma bolt barely registered on our shield grid. Chen frowned. Either the aliens were testing their defenses, or their weapons were not as advanced as intelligence had suggested. Either way, he could not risk the lives of his crew or the innocent civilians on the planet below. All ships, weapons free, Chen ordered. Target their military vessels only. We are here to liberate that planet, not destroy it. What happened next lasted exactly 17 minutes and 43 seconds. The human fleet opened fire with weapons, designed to fight peer opponents in major fleet engagements. Each human vessel carried enough firepower to level continents. The Crovus ships, built for intimidation rather than serious combat, disintegrated under the barrage. Their shields collapsed instantly, their armor vaporized, their weapons designed to disable rather than destroy could not even scratch the human vessels. Escathar watched in horror as his entire fleet disappeared from his tactical display. 11 Imperial warships simply ceased to exist, reduced to expanding clouds of superheated metal and plasma. His flagship was the only vessel left intact, and that was only because a human torpedo had damaged his engines instead of his reactor. Emergency evacuation, he screamed to his surviving crew. All hands to escape pods. The ship is lost. The few Crovas who made it to escape pods ejected into space just as their flagship exploded. They floated helplessly, watching debris rain down on the planet they had been trying to conquer. The entire Imperial fleet had been annihilated by an enemy they had never encountered before. On Zelthara Prime, Elder Bloomtel stood in his garden, watching the sky fill with fire. Massive explosions lit up the darkness as the Crovus ships died one by one. The peaceful plant being had never witnessed violence on such a scale. His petals dimmed to almost black with shock. Elder, what is happening up there? Petalwind asked, her own colors fading to pale yellow with fear. Who is fighting the Crovus? Bloomtel had no answer. The Galactic Council had never demonstrated this kind of military power. He had expected negotiators to arrive with peaceful solutions, not warriors who could destroy entire fleets in minutes. The explosions in orbit were visible even in daylight. I do not know, he whispered, but whoever they are far more dangerous than the Crovus ever were. Colonel Lisa Hayes watched the orbital battle from the hangar bay of her assault carrier. Her Marines were already loaded into dropships, ready to begin ground operations. She had expected to face heavy resistance during the planetary assault, but the naval battle was over before her troops could even launch. Marines, listen up, she announced over the squad comm channels. Naval forces have eliminated the blockade. We are proceeding with ground operations to secure the surface and provide humanitarian assistance to survivors. The first wave of dropships launched toward the planet's surface. Hayes led the assault in her command ship, scanning the terrain below for signs of enemy ground forces. What she saw confused her tactical training. Instead of bombed cities and devastated landscapes, she saw pristine agricultural valleys filled with colorful vegetation. There were no military installations, no defensive positions, no signs of battle damage. The planet looked like a peaceful garden world that had never experienced war. Colonel, Sensors are not detecting any hostile ground forces, reported Sergeant Bill Carter, her tactical specialist. In fact, we are not detecting any military assets at all. Hayes frowned as her dropship descended toward a clearing near what appeared to be the planet's capital city. The buildings below looked like they were grown rather than built, with organic curves and living walls covered in flowering vines. It was beautiful and completely unlike any war zone she had ever seen. The dropships landed in formation, and 200 heavily armed Marines deployed across the landing zone. They took defensive positions and swept the area for threats, but found only gardens and peaceful structures. The air smelled like flowers instead of smoke and explosives. Then Hayes saw them. Creatures that looked like walking flowers emerged from the buildings, moving slowly toward the landing zone. They were tall and graceful, with petals instead of hair and skin that seemed to shift through different colors. They did not carry weapons or wear armor. The lead creature approached Hayes with obvious caution. When it spoke, its voice sounded like wind through leaves, musical and soft. The translation device in her helmet converted the words into English. "Please, we mean no harm," the creature said. "We are grateful you drove away the Krovas, but we do not understand why you brought so many weapons to our peaceful world." Hayes stared at the alien through her helmet visor. This was not what she had expected to find on a planet that had been under siege for weeks. These creatures looked like they had never seen violence in their entire lives. "We received your distress call," she replied carefully. "You requested immediate military assistance against hostile occupation forces." The flower-like being's colors shifted to confused purples and blues. "We requested aid, yes, but we asked for teachers and medical personnel. We wanted peaceful negotiators who could help us understand this crisis." Colonel Hayes felt a cold realization settle in her stomach. Something had gone very wrong with the mission briefing. Dr. Amy Roberts stepped out of her transport ship and immediately noticed how different this world was from any she had visited before. The air was clean and sweet, filled with the scent of countless flowers. Everything around her seemed to glow, with soft, natural light. Even the buildings appeared to be alive, covered in vines and blooming plants. She was the fleet's expert on alien life forms, and her job was to help humans understand new species they encountered. But as she watched the flower-like beings gather around the landing zone, she realized this would be unlike any first contact situation she had studied. Elder Bloomtell approached the group of humans slowly, his colors shifting between nervous yellows and curious greens. He had never seen creatures like these before. They were covered in hard shells that looked like weapons, and each one carried devices that could probably destroy his entire city. "Welcome to our world," Bloomtell said through the translation device. "I am Elder Bloomtell, speaker for the Zeltharans. We are grateful you drove away the Krovas, but we are also frightened by your weapons and your manner of arrival." Dr. Roberts removed her helmet, showing her human face to the alien leader. She had learned that many species responded better when they could see facial expressions. "I am Dr. Amy Roberts. We came because we received your request for military assistance." Bloomtell's petals dimmed with confusion. "We did not request military assistance, Dr. Roberts. We asked for aid workers, teachers, and medical personnel. We wanted someone to help us understand why the Krovas were threatening our peaceful world." Colonel Hayes, standing nearby in her battle armor, felt increasingly uncomfortable. Her Marines were trained to fight enemies, not to provide humanitarian aid to flower people who had never experienced violence. The more she learned about the Zeltharans, the more she realized how badly they had misunderstood the situation. Dr. Roberts began asking questions about Zeltharan society, and each answer made the humans more uncomfortable. The plant beings had never fought a war in their entire history. They reproduced by sharing consciousness during blooming seasons, made decisions through group meditation, and had never killed another thinking creature. "Dr. Roberts, perhaps you could explain your species to us," Bloomtell requested. "We have never met beings who carry so many weapons or who can destroy entire fleets so quickly. Your arrival was more frightening than the Krovas blockade." Dr. Roberts looked at Colonel Hayes, then at the Marines who were still holding their weapons ready for combat. How could she explain humanity to beings who had never experienced violence? How could she describe a species that had evolved through Millions of years of warfare and survival? We come from a world called Earth, she began carefully. Our planet is very different from yours. We evolved surrounded by creatures that wanted to kill us. We had to learn to fight to survive. Petalwind, the young Zeltharan's assistant, translated for the other plant beings who had gathered to listen. Their colors shifted to pale blues and whites, which Dr. Roberts was learning meant confusion and fear. You mean your world tried to kill you while you were growing up as a species? Bloomtel asked. How terrible that must have been. How did you survive such a place? Major Dan Foster, Colonel Hayes' second-in-command, had been reviewing the tactical data from the space battle. He approached the group with a worried expression, carrying a datapad filled with information about the Crovus fleet. Colonel, we need to talk, he said quietly. I have been analyzing the enemy weapons and ship design. I think we made a serious mistake. Hayes stepped away from the aliens to speak privately with her officer. What did you find, Major? Foster showed her the data on his pad. The Crovus weapons were designed to disable, not destroy. Their ships were built for intimidation, not serious combat. Look at these power readings. Their strongest weapon has less firepower than our smallest. Sidearm. Hayes studied the numbers and felt her stomach drop. Are you saying they were not really a military threat? Not in the way we understand military threats, Foster replied. They were bullies, Colonel. They were using fear and intimidation to force weaker species to surrender. They probably never expected to fight anyone who could actually fight back. Meanwhile, intercepted communications from the Crovus escape pods were reaching the human fleet. Admiral Chen listened to the panicked transmissions with growing concern. The surviving Crovus were sending desperate messages to their homeworld, describing the humans as impossible killers who destroyed fleets without effort. Captain Morrison reviewed the translations in his ready room. The Crovus were calling humans Deathworld demons and creatures of pure violence. They described the human attack as casual annihilation and warned their empire that these new aliens considered total destruction a normal response to any threat. Back on the planet's surface, Dr. Roberts was trying to explain human military doctrine to Elder Bloomtel. The plant being listened with growing horror as she described how Earth's hostile environment had created a species that viewed overwhelming violence as a reasonable response to protecting innocent people. So when you received our request for aid, you naturally assumed we wanted you to destroy our enemies completely? Bloomtel asked. That is correct, Dr. Roberts admitted. In human culture, when someone asks for help against a military threat, we eliminate that threat entirely. We do not negotiate with bullies or allow them to continue threatening peaceful people. The Zeltharans in the gathering began changing colors rapidly, cycling through emotions they had never experienced before. The concept of a species that would kill to protect strangers was both terrifying and amazing to them. Colonel Hayes rejoined the conversation, having removed her helmet to appear less threatening. Elder Bloomtel, I need to ask you something important. What kind of aid were you actually hoping to receive? Bloomtel's colors shifted to sad greens as he considered the question. We hoped for teachers who could help us understand why the Crovus wanted to hurt us. We wanted medical personnel who could help us deal with the stress of being threatened. We wanted negotiators who could speak with the Crovus and find a peaceful solution. The silence that followed was uncomfortable for everyone. The humans had brought the most advanced weapons in their fleet to help people who wanted nothing more than someone to talk to their bullies for them. Dr. Roberts was the first to speak. Elder, I need you to understand something about humans. We are not naturally violent beings despite what you have seen. We fight because we believe that peaceful people like you should never have to live in fear. Bloomtel's colors shifted to thoughtful purples. You destroyed the Crovus fleet to protect people you had never met? Yes, Colonel Hayes answered. That is what humans do. When we see innocent people being threatened, we stop the threat. We do not negotiate with bullies or allow them to continue causing harm. The Zeltharans spent several minutes in silent communication, their colors shifting as they shared thoughts among themselves. Finally, Bloomtel spoke for all of them. We are grateful for your protection, even though your methods frightened us, he said. But we are also concerned. If you are willing to destroy entire fleets to help strangers, what does that make you? Dr. Roberts looked at the peaceful garden world around them, then at the Marines who were still standing ready for combat, against enemies that no longer existed. I think, Elder Bloomtell, that makes us your guardians, whether we intended to be or not. In space above them, the wreckage of the Crovus fleet continued to orbit the planet like a metal ring, a permanent reminder of what happened when someone threatened people under human protection. 3 weeks after what the galaxy now called the Zelthara incident, Ambassador Vextai of the Meridian Federation stood before the emergency session of the Galactic Council. Representatives from 47 different species filled the great chamber, their various forms creating a rainbow of colors and shapes that normally brought him comfort. Today, however, the mood was one of barely controlled panic. Fellow council members, Vextai began, his scaled hands trembling slightly as he activated the holographic display. We face an unprecedented situation. A new species has entered our galaxy, and their military capabilities exceed anything in our databases. The display showed tactical analysis of the human fleet engagement. Numbers scrolled past that made veteran military officers from across the galaxy shake their heads in disbelief. A force of human ships numbering less than 20 had destroyed an entire Crovus Imperial fleet in under 18 minutes without taking any damage. General Krixtar of the Andromedian Defense Corps, a species known for their own military prowess, stood to address the chamber. Honorable Ambassador, our analysts have reviewed this data 17 times. The weapons yield, the tactical precision, the speed of engagement. These humans possess military technology that is centuries ahead of our own. In the human section of the chamber, which had been hastily added after the incident, Captain Jake Morrison sat uncomfortably in a chair designed for beings half his size. He had been promoted to ambassador after Admiral Chen decided that someone who had actually fought the engagement should represent humanity to the council. Morrison cleared his throat and activated his translation device. Respected council members, I believe there has been a fundamental misunderstanding about human intentions and capabilities. The chamber fell silent. Many species had never heard a human voice before, and Morrison's deep, gravelly tone carried the authority of someone who had seen real combat. When he stood, his imposing height caused several smaller species to move away from him instinctively. We did not come to your galaxy seeking conquest or domination, Morrison continued. We received what we believed was a distress call from people who needed help. Our response was proportional to what we perceived as the threat level. Elder Bloomtell, who had been granted special permission to address the council, changed his colors to supportive greens as he spoke. Fellow beings, I must tell you that while the human methods were terrifying to witness, their intentions were purely protective. They risked their own lives to defend people they had never met. The Crovus Empire had sent their own representative, a nervous-looking reptilian diplomat named Subcommander Hestal. His species had never appeared before the council as anything other than conquerors. But the destruction of their fleet had changed everything about their approach to galactic relations. The Empire wishes to formally apologize to the Zeltharans. People, Hestal announced, his voice barely above a whisper. We also wish to establish immediate diplomatic relations with the human government to ensure no further misunderstandings occur. Ambassador Vextai looked around the chamber, noting the mixture of fear and curiosity on the faces of the various species. Captain Morrison, the Council needs to understand the scope of human military capabilities. Are there more fleets like the one that engaged the Crovus? Morrison considered his answer carefully. The truth was that the Retribution Battle Group was considered a medium-sized patrol force by Earth standards. The real human fleet, designed to fight wars against peer opponents, was hundreds of times larger and more powerful. The force that responded to Zelthara Prime represents a small fraction of human military capability, he said finally. However, we have no interest in using that power for conquest. Earth's military doctrine focuses on defense and the protection of innocent people. The chamber erupted in whispered conversations as species representatives tried to process this information. If the humans considered the devastating force that destroyed the Crovus fleet to be a small patrol, What did their real military look like? Dr. Amy Roberts, who had been studying Zeltheran society for the past 3 weeks, stood to address the council. Honorable representatives, I have spent time with the Zeltheran's people, and I believe I understand the root of this incident. There was a communication failure that sent our military forces instead of our aid workers. She activated her own display, showing the message routing error that had caused the entire situation. The Zeltherans requested teachers, medical personnel, and negotiators. Due to translation errors and outdated routing systems, their request was interpreted as a call for military intervention. Elder Bloomtell's colors shifted to amused yellows as he spoke. Dr. Roberts has been an excellent teacher. She has helped us understand that humans are not naturally violent beings. They are protective beings who happen to be very good at violence when protection is required. Over the following days, the Council worked to establish new protocols for communication with the human government. Captain Morrison found himself in the unusual position of trying to explain Earth's defensive philosophy to species that had never encountered anything like it. The Krovis Empire, meanwhile, had undergone a complete transformation. Emperor Kal-Eth himself sent a personal message to Earth, formally apologizing for the threat to Zelthara Prime and requesting peaceful relations with humanity. The Empire's entire military doctrine was being rewritten based on the new reality of human involvement in galactic affairs. Colonel Lisa Hayes established the first permanent human base on Zelthara Prime, where her Marines found themselves serving as the galaxy's most effective peacekeeping force. The mere presence of human ships in a system became enough to prevent conflicts before they started. Colonel, we have another request for assistance, Sergeant Bill Carter reported during their weekly briefing. The Pellucid Collective is asking for help with pirate raids in their outer systems. Hayes smiled as she reviewed the request. Unlike the original Zeltharan's message, this one was very clear about what kind of help was needed. The Pellucids wanted the pirates stopped, permanently, and they understood exactly what human assistance would involve. Prep a squadron for deployment, she ordered, and make sure they understand the new protocols. We provide protection, which means anyone threatening innocent people will face the full weight of human military response. Word of human protective capabilities spread throughout the galaxy faster than light travel. Species that had suffered under aggressive neighbors for centuries suddenly found themselves with options they had never considered before. The phrase requesting human aid became galactic shorthand for preparing to end a conflict permanently. Bullying species across the galaxy began reconsidering their approaches to diplomacy when they realized their victims might call for help from beings who viewed the complete elimination of threats as standard operating procedure. Dr. Roberts established the Zelthara Cultural Exchange Center, where humans learned advanced botanical sciences and sustainable agriculture from the plant beings. In return, they taught the Zeltharans about defensive technologies and conflict resolution through strength rather than surrender. The interesting thing about humans, Elder Bloomtell explained to a group of visiting council diplomats, is that they do not seek to conquer or control. They seek to protect and nurture. They simply happen to be extremely effective at removing anything that threatens the things they protect. Admiral Chen, now promoted to Fleet Admiral and commander of the new Terran Protectorate, reviewed reports from across human-protected space. Conflicts that had raged for decades were ending within days of human involvement, not through negotiation or compromise, but through the simple reality that aggressive species could no longer afford to be aggressive. Final report of the Zelthara Incident Commission concluded with a recommendation that changed the galaxy forever. The Council formally recognized humanity's role as protectors of peaceful civilizations, establishing the Human Protection Doctrine as official galactic policy. Under the new doctrine, any species could request human protection by demonstrating they were peaceful and faced threats from aggressive neighbors. Once humans accepted the responsibility, any attack on the protected species would be treated as an attack on humanity itself. Ambassador Vexitai stood in his office, looking out at the garden that the Zeltharans had planted for him as a gift. In the distance, a human patrol ship moved silently through space, its presence ensuring that no one would ever again threaten the peaceful species under its protection. His aide entered with the daily intelligence report. Sir, The hegemony of Sectar has formally withdrawn their territorial claims against the Whisper Worlds. They cite concern about human response as their primary reason. Vextai nodded, unsurprised. The galaxy was learning that humanity's definition of aid included the guaranteed annihilation of anyone who threatened those they had chosen to protect. It was terrifying and comforting at the same time. "Any word from the Outer Rim?" he asked. "Yes, sir. 3 more species have formally requested inclusion in the Terran Protectorate. They understand that human protection comes with human methods." Vextai smiled as he watched children from 6 different species playing together in the garden. Below,